So yeah, I'm Curtis Turner. I'm a teaching professor in the College of Education. Thanks for coming. I know you didn't have to be here, so I appreciate it. Normally I work in events where everybody has to be there. So it's kind of nice that someone actually chose to come today. I think hopefully the topic is interesting to you. It sounds like a lot of you have some background that's going to create interest for sure. It connects with every one of you, whether that has dawned on you or not, because we've all been in schools. We're going to have children who go through schools. So what I'm talking about today really affects and touches potentially everyone, sometimes in a positive way, often in a very negative way. That's really what I'm here for, is to kind of present that as a problem, and as a problem that I feel like I've worked on for several years, but I'd like to take to the next level. And I think this project for me is kind of the impetus to move forward with some work in that area. But finishing a little bit about me, I'm in the College of Education. I work in pre-service teacher prep, teaching and learning. So I train teachers. I've been here for about 12 years. I'm like the cleanup guy in the department. So I teach whatever classes available. I have a breadth of experience, so I can teach a lot of different things somewhat well, some things really well. Most commonly, I've taught educational psychology a lot, and then math methods, because math is my area of expertise. But the breadth of my career, I'm a 32-year educator. I passed that threshold in January of this year. The first 15 and a half years of my career were in K-12. The last 16 and a half have been in higher ed. Although in the last 16 and a half, of the 12 years I've been at UCCS, I've spent 11 of them working in K-12 schools. I'm out in schools at least twice a week. I do this to stay current. I just find opportunities to help. I worked with departments, helping them align their math instruction to very complex curricula that's out there. And often I'm called in to improve their test scores, which I hate. I despise that. I have to frame it as I'm walking in there to help them improve teaching and learning, which a byproduct of that is we're going to improve your test scores. But I don't think that should be the focus. I struggle with that. I think that's a bad focus, which you're going to come to the realization of through this presentation. In the breadth of my career, just to establish some credibility and show you that I'm qualified to give a presentation like this. I've done pretty much everything there is to do in education. I started as a teacher, math and science, middle and high school. I became an elementary principal in a very small school district, so I still taught math classes in that same district while I was a principal. I was an athletic director. I drove a bus sometimes when I was in K-12. The superintendent and we never had enough bus drivers, so we got our CDLs, and on occasion I'd leave my principal's office to go take the kids home from school, which I really loved all those aspects of what I did. Worked in a school where we did not, that the test was important. We set aside the time to prepare. We prepared our kids well, but it wasn't the end all be all. We made sure that our kids knew it wasn't what defined them, which is the least we can do with this type of thing. And then since then, I've been in higher ed. I was a dean at a community college. Love the community college system, by the way. Worked with a lot of people at Pueblo Community College, did a lot of state level work in the community college system around developmental education, which is for students who the K-12 system has essentially failed. Now they have to go to a community college. We have developmental courses here too, but it means they have to retake courses that they should have learned in high school, and now they have to pay money for them. And hate's a strong word. I tend to overstate, but I did not like the fact that kids had to pay money, or 40-year-old adults had to pay money for stuff that they should have already learned. So it really started, that's really where the crux of all this work for me came from, I think. And that's me. I'm going to start, so throughout this presentation, there's going to be like 3 levels. I'm going to start with a story. It's a fiction based on true events story that I wrote kind of for this. I wanted to have a little video, but I didn't have a chance to get that done, nor do I possess the skill to do that. So I wrote a story instead. So a little story, I'm going to read you a storybook, just like you're in elementary school, and that's what it's going to feel like. But you're going to be very quiet because everybody loves to be read to. Doesn't matter what age you are. And then we're going to set up a problem solution scenario where I'm going to present some problems that you're probably already aware of. The problems come from my personal lived experience, but also this year I have been, with most of my classes, I've been having them interview students or former students and teachers, asking them questions about how they feel about standards-based testing, how it impacts kids, whether it's good, the good and the bad. So some of the points will come from the feedback from professionals and also people from the perspective of being students. and you all share those. I am going to stop every once in a while and give you a chance to talk and process and give me some input too, because I know you all have experience surrounding standards-based testing, and I'd like to learn a little bit more about it. Then we're going to end with solutions. Over 15 years of my career, I've been in academic leadership. And when I had meetings, one of my meeting norms was, you don't bring problems, you bring solutions. We know there are problems, they're easy to identify. Sometimes we need to break them apart a little bit, but we exhaust ourselves talking about problems. So at the meeting, we're going to talk about how we solve those problems. So I don't want to just dump a problem on you. I want to talk about solutions. I'm going to highlight schools that I've found that I think are doing better. There are schools that every minute of their day or every conversation I'm in, they're talking about test scores, and I think it's the wrong focus. Like I've already said, there are schools who don't do that, so I'm going to try to highlight some of those. And then I'll share some of my own work that I think aligns to this for sure, future goals, and then hopefully through the presentation, my main point is to stir some emotion, maybe some anxiety for some of you based on past experiences. But I'd also like to find some advocates who, I guess I'm looking for feedback, advocates in that if you want to join and help me with some of the work that I plan to do, that'd be awesome. Or if you just want to affirm, say, this is good stuff, you should pursue it. There are questions that need to be asked that aren't being asked. You should continue. Or tell me you're just like your conspiracy theory father, and you probably should dump it. You're just crazy. My father is very much that. Love the guy, but it's where I get my cynicism from. It's inherited. Oh, now this thing's not going to work. Maybe it'll work now. Okay, got it. The young men featured in this first few slides are my grandchildren, so you can ooh and ah, it would be appreciated. And the rest are just stock photos. I have a ton of slides, but don't be alarmed. Most of them are this short. Hey, and this is really uncomfortable for me. I'm a math guy, so it's about facts, and getting all flowery and touchy-feely is hard for me. Hey, look at me. I'm down here, a little lower, just a bit lower. Now you've got it. Do you see me? Can you hear me? I realize I seem small and insignificant. I understand that I need to be shaped to some degree, but I'm not without a voice, and I'm not without unique gifts. Yes, I have unique gifts. My own signature. My signature is what makes me, well, me. And there's a reason for that, which no one really knows yet. But given the chance, I will someday mark the chalkboards of my school and the walls of my world with it. Now listen closely. There's something very important I need you to know. Please listen very closely, because it's noisy in here today. I am more than a test score. Did you hear me? I don't think you did. I'll say it again. I am more than a test score. I already have dreams of my own. These dreams will continue to change and to shape me. These dreams will become my purpose in life, as long as they aren't erased in the effort to make me fit your standards. You give me the room, the time, and the chance, I will grow and learn in exactly the way I've been designed to learn. I will learn exactly what I need to learn in order to achieve my purpose in life. Eventually, I will have goals, and I will aspire to them. But I'll need your help with the building blocks on which to achieve these goals. Just to be clear, here's what I need from you. I need foundations on which to fulfill my dreams and my purpose. But right now, I'm staring down this narrow hallway with only one direction. I wish I had 100 hallways from which to choose, but there only seems to be one. I see those who achieve within this single hallway. They seem happy, and you seem happy with them. But you, my guide, my teacher, are not happy with me. You want me to choose the same path as everyone else. Now neither of us are happy. I can see the stress in your eyes. I know you want to help. You feel pressured to take me down the same path as everyone else. You feel pressured to make me walk at the same pace as everyone else. I know you want to help me do well. I know you want to help me down the path that I choose. I try, but I just can't seem to walk at the same pace as everyone else. And you will not slow down for me. I am not dumb, but there are a lot of days I feel that way. Some days I want to give up because it's so hard to try and be someone who I am not. As the years progress, it just gets harder, and some days I do quit. On those days, I seem lazy, or as if I don't care. As time passes, the numbness starts to set in, and I think, perhaps everyone is right. Maybe I am lazy. Some days I don't want to care. Other days, I don't care. I drift further and further into academic darkness. I don't care. It's less embarrassing and it hurts less if I don't care, so I just don't care. Now I'm coming to your class and I don't perform, don't want to. Years ago, I tried to play your game and was no good at it, so I quit trying. Now I'm bad, troublemaker, someone you wish would stay home. You used to have meetings about how to solve my problems with learning. Now you have meetings about how to solve my behavior. Here I sit, still just a test score. Not a good one, though. A problem. A problem that makes your system look bad. Because of me, men and women, people sit around a room and speak angrily, most about data, locked in soul-killing conversations about a test. The beauty of who I am becomes someone I am ashamed of. I wasn't always like this. I felt uniquely beautiful on my first day of school. The day I met my best friends, Cindy and Jose, and was greeted by Mrs. White. When she saw me, she smiled. She really saw me. But what happened? If only you had seen the true me all these years, the same way Mrs. White saw me. If only the test score wasn't the only thing I had of value to offer you. I desperately want to tell you, to show you, I am so much more. But for now, I don't care, so I will go. You don't have to worry about me anymore. I've given you the reason to quit on me. Anyway, back to your test. If you've been a teacher, then there's definitely a picture of a student you had in your mind as you think, because this is what happens. They just slowly disappear in the standards-based system. Not all of them, of course, some do quite well. Fortunately, my children all did well. We didn't experience the other side of that, but there are many that do. I want to make a disclaimer here, because it might sound, sometimes I'm passionate enough about this, I might sound a little bit savage, and it might sound like I'm disparaging educators. That is not the point. I'm not. They're not the nefarious actors in this situation. If there are any that come from the for-profit industry, and the cynic and me questions that, you'll hear about that a little bit later when I get into kind of the ethical implications of standards-based systems. But teachers, I will never disparage. Teachers are the heroes. Teachers, when I go to a counter and they ask me, are you military, first responder, they should also ask, are you teacher? Because they're at the same level of importance in our society. Unfortunately, I think politically, we don't really see it that way, and they're not championed. They should be. I will never cut down a teacher. An administrator, sometimes, because they aggravate me, even though I was one, they're just doing their job. There's a lot of pressure put on them. Every year, their scores are reported, and it's published for everyone to see, and the principal's name is on the score sheet. Curtis Turner's name used to be on one of those score sheets. There's a lot of pressure on them, and they sometimes bring that pressure down. It's not their fault. They did not get into this work to do that. If you asked any of them, they would tell you the same. So in no shape, way, or form am I disparaging educators. School board members, possibly. Policymakers, absolutely. I just think there are questions we never ask. Hopefully you'll agree with me by the end of this. But teachers, no. Teachers, well, you'll find out at the very end. I'm going to give away the punchline. They are the solution. We'll explain why. First is standard if you don't understand them. Every industry has standards, I'm sure. For education, maybe they're a bit different. If you teach college classes, a standard is like an objective. It's very similar. But a standard is a set of standards are a set of criteria that all students are expected to achieve. There are standards for all subject areas at all grades, kindergarten through 12th grade. Math, science, language arts, social studies, dance, theater, music, art. If it's taught, there are a set of standards. If you look at the standards in the state of Colorado, K through 5, every set is about 85 pages. So multiply that by whatever. And yeah, there are art and PE standards, even in elementary school. Tons of documents that the teachers and administrators have to sift through to try to align to standards because they're held accountable. Standardization, standards in and of themselves aren't bad. We need a goal, we need an aim, that's necessary. We have this discussion with my students in all my class, in my educational psychology class, and we always arrive. the conclusion that standards are a necessary evil. We need them because you can't train a third grade teacher, send them to the third grade and say, just figure out what to teach. They need to know, they need to have something to aim for. So that I don't have a problem with standards. They have to be there. Standardization is where it starts to get a little bit muddy. And I mean, this is just logic and common sense, I think. In standardization, they're held accountable to those standards by the test. The test that's given one time in a year, one time per year, about April in Colorado, when schools have gone through about 80% of their instructional year, is when we test kids in whole school, where the accountability measure comes into play. And the expectation is that every fifth grade student knows the exact same things or can recall the exact same things on that one day in a highly stressful situation. Hopefully you see the problem in that. It's one size fits all. There's no variation. Every kid's expected to measure at the same level, know the same things, kind of like computer systems. Testing is one time per year. I already went through that. And I haven't gotten into the problem scenario. We'll dig a little deeper into that. But I'm going to tell you part of my personal story now and what really brought me to the table here today. I was a believer. I drank the Kool-Aid in standards-based assessment. Sorry. Forgive me because I've changed. She made a bad face.
I'm sorry. I'm very facially expressive person.
I like that. I'm watching you to kind of gauge how it's going. I was a principal at the age, I turned 30 in a principal's office, which never should happen. If you aspire to be in education, don't be a principal at 30. It's suicide. It's career suicide. I actually survived it, oddly somehow. But anyway, at 30, I became a principal. I inherited a high-performing school, great teachers, amazing teachers. When it came to state testing time, we looked good. In fact, in our area, southeastern Colorado is where I worked, and all of southeastern Colorado, which is about 500 people, but thousands of square miles. It's more than 500 people. That's a joke. If you've been there, you get it. But we outperformed everyone. Our high school was the highest performing high school in the area. We were often the James Irwin School of Excellence, the highest rating you can get for a school. Our middle school was the highest performing in our area. Our elementary was the highest performing in our area, except for one school. Turner was very competitive, especially when he was young. I was also an athletics coach, and I liked to win. I was taught to win. I liked to win. That bothered me that there was one school that was better than us. I wanted to be better. Every year, right before CMAS, it was called CSAT then, we would have our kids do a writing sample, and the 4 elementaries would gather together. We would grade each other's writing samples and give each other feedback. That's a really good practice for education. It was great professional development for my staff, but of course, we also wanted to improve our testing outcomes. Usually I didn't go because my building was full of substitutes, which is potential disaster if you've ever been in the role. So I would stay home. This year I went because I'm going to find out that school's secrets. So I grabbed one of their test files and started grading their tests. And I'm reviewing their tests, first one, second one, really good. I see why they're beating us, why they outperform us on the test. Third, fourth, fifth, it starts to occur to me, I'm basically reading the same writings. There was no variation. I mean, the stories were slightly different, but the transition words, all these things were almost identical, which that happens when you're learning to write. There's some systems, that need to be learned. Writing's not my area, but there's some structure that kids have to learn. So there's some of that in there. What I was thinking while I was reading these assessments was my teachers, who were all literacy experts, I was the least expert in that field. So I had to lean on them, which is a really good tip if you ever want to be an administrator. Empower your teachers because they're the really intelligent ones. But they would always tell me how important voice was. Voice is the component of writing that makes it yours. It's your signature. If you have a favorite author, probably it's because you like their voice, whether you know it or not. You can read something and not even see their name and know it's them. That's voice. There was no voice in these papers. When I read our students, our teachers really hammered that. They really emphasized that. And you could the teachers would know the kids so well, they could read the writing sample without seeing their name and often guess who it might be. That's voice. This was gone. So I remember it was like, this is an overstatement, but it was almost like an epiphany. I sat there, I thought, well, this is not what I want for our kids. I don't want them to be exactly the same. That robs them of something that I thought was precious. Met with my staff the next week because we talked about my goal. And I told them what I learned, and they agreed that's not what we want. We'll continue doing what we're doing. End of the story is we never beat that school. And I'm fine with that now. I'm sure their kids went on to do well too, but we just wanted to do it a little bit differently. Now I'm going to stop for a second because I've been going on for 10 to 15 minutes now. I want you to share, just quickly get an elbow partner and share your personal experience with standards-based testing, positive, negative, just chat a little bit about it. And I'm going to wander around and listen. Heard great conversation. Let's just quickly show of hands. How many of you had some sort of negative experience along? I mean, if you're here, you probably had a lot of positive experiences with it too, but everybody had a negative. Tracy was sharing that hers was in 3rd grade. She couldn't tell time.
I was an
on
A
digital
student
clock.
and I failed in telling time. And that's the only thing I can remember.
And that's a negative impact. In the same school that I worked, where we were hero, I mean, we were like, not heroes, but we felt that way, right? You know, high performers. I mean, we rivaled Douglas County, the wealthiest districts, and we had high poverty, so we took a lot of pride in that. In that same district where I'm feeling good about things, my wife was the ESL teacher, and she had quite a different story. So this was eye-opening for me. I'm talking about how well we did, and she said, well, my kids were crying in the 2 weeks we gave that test, because they walk in, you know, once you meet a certain level of language proficiency, you have to take the English test. Doesn't matter the context you lack and the bias that's very likely in there. I mean, my wife read it. My wife was a high achiever in school. My wife is a Mexican immigrant. I guess I should tell that part. Moved here when she was 5, spoke no English, did really well in school because she just we had this little utopic school who just did great things with kids, especially our immigrant students. A lot of them graduated with honors. She was the valedictorian of her class. But she remembers a test question she missed on ACT because it talked about ice cubes. If you know the Hispanic culture, they don't have ice cubes. She grew up without them. It's like some kind of, they'll make you sick or something, so they don't use them. So there's a lot of that stuff that comes into testing. She taught those kids, and it was miserable for those poor kids. They knew walking in it was going to be, because the test went on forever, it seemed like, and they couldn't do anything. They knew their situation. They knew they weren't going to do well, but it didn't help them. They still felt bad. Of course, she had to try to repair those feelings. Obviously, that's a problem. So we're gonna start with the problem scenario. You probably talked about some of these, so I'll try to rush through this pretty quickly. This is stuff, well, maybe some of the stuff you don't know. Testing in Colorado for 3rd through 8th grade, 3rd through 8th grade, 3rd through 11th grade are the tested grades. 3rd through 8th take CSAP. That takes, most schools set aside 2 weeks for CSAP. And they shut down learning. I mean, they literally don't allow teachers to teach new stuff. This is what I've heard. I do not know why. There's still some practicing, you know, they do some review stuff, which is always good. You can't review enough. So there are good things that happen to some degree, but for the most part, we shut down learning for 2 weeks. I did the math on that. That's a little over 75%, or that's I'm sorry. The next thing is 80%. That's over 5% of their instructional time. That doesn't sound like much, but if you've taught in a classroom, every day is precious because there's never enough time. 5% of their time, we stop learning and test. That's a problem for me. They're tested at the 80% mark, so teachers are held accountable, students are held accountable for all this accumulated knowledge a little over 3/4 of the way through the school year, because the testing comes early in April. They have 5-6 weeks after that. They can learn more things, but they have part of a year, the bigger part of a year, to learn the content. Seems to defy logic to me. And then they don't get the results till well into the next school year. So it's not like they turn them around quickly, which is another issue because they don't get the results in enough time to really do anything with it. Professional spend, and this is my input. I personally, to show you I practice what I preach, I do not give tests in my classes. I don't give any type of formal test because all a test does is evaluate what a student can recall at a given moment in time in a highly stressful situation. No offense if you give tests. I know that's what we do. I just don't, because I don't get the best information out of my kids that way. How many of you have walked into a test, couldn't remember something, walked out, and suddenly I remember it? You knew it. Recall and memory are two different things. Recall can be inhibited by fear. If you're in a highly stressful situation, there's a little bit of fear there that's going to disrupt some of your recall, even if you've learned it. But it only tests what they can recall on a given day at that specific time. If they were abused before they walked into the classroom, if they weren't fed well, doesn't matter. It's what they can recall on that given day. Not what people learned, what they demonstrated across the spectrum of their learning. Professionals spend exorbitant amounts of time on this, preparing for the test, being trained. Publishers come in, they spend millions of dollars bringing in trainers to help us do better on the test. They may disguise it somewhat, but usually it's about doing better on this test. And the millions of dollars is not an exaggeration. One large school district in this city, I promise you the PD budget is well over $1 million, and most of it is around improving test scores. And I'm not, now it sounds like I'm disparaging educators. I'm not. They're doing what they have to do. And I'll simplify that point later. And here's a big problem. This, to me, is the biggest problem with standardization. If they're not successful at the fourth grade, so say they take the fourth grade test, they're underperforming in math. What do? We graduate, they move to the fifth grade, and I'm not a believer in retention. That's not the solution. It doesn't work well. That's been heavily researched. We used to retain kids when I was a principal, rarely. Sometimes it was necessary. But we move them on to the fifth grade, and then the fifth grade teachers held accountable for fifth grade standards. So they'll even say they have a right to grade level content. So imagine if you didn't master division at the fourth grade level, which is dividing one digit into 4 digits. Don't even have to do it using the standard algorithm. You use all kinds of crazy algorithms. Don't get me started on the math stuff. We'll never get out of here. So if they haven't mastered that in fifth grade, the expectation is 2 digits into up to 4 digits using the standard algorithm, which is a lot more complex. If they haven't mastered fourth grade, how do you think they're going to do on the fifth grade material? So go back to the pic in the story, fading into academic darkness. Imagine this kid as they progress through the grades. Eventually, they're at a place where they can't even connect with the content that the teacher's presenting most of the time. They're sitting in the classroom, a complete waste of their time. They're completely gone and checked out the whole time because they can't engage. That's obviously a problem with a standards-based system. From feedback I got from, and a lot of that was from feedback from teachers. A lot of it's my personal lived experience, which has been significant. And then some of this comes from kids. Kids are not motivated by the content. What I mean by that is we test math and language arts, reading and writing. Honestly, that's not what most kids are interested in elementary. They love science. They love all music. They love to play. So we test them in the things they're least interested in. So you can't really engage them through interest. High school kids forget about it. They're not interested in anything. And that's not true. If you've taught high school kids, you get my frustration. But they're not motivated by the content. They're motivated by other things. You can convince them to learn your content. They're not motivated by what we test, so that's a problem. They're not motivated by the competition. They don't care how you look for the most part. Now that can be changed, like with my kids. My kids tested really well usually because I did a lot of repetition, things that you're not supposed to do now with my classes, but my kids usually tested really well. But one thing I did was before the test, I said, listen, this test is an evaluation of me. It's telling us how I did, not how you did. It's helping me measure the effectiveness of my teaching. Do I need to change some things? Have I changed some things that didn't work or did work? This is the information I get from it. So I really need you to do your best on it so I can find out how I did. My kids, your kids need to like you. Luckily, most of them did, really responded to that. They would give it everything they had. Different way to motivate it, because I needed that score to be good too, because I'm the teacher. That someone's going to look at that. It limits exposure to other things they are interested in. If you're in an elementary school, most of the day is math, reading, and writing. If they work in science, that is definitely an extra 20 or 40 minutes a week. They still got to go to music and PE. For a time, we were starting to lose the arts. I think schools have done a good job of recapturing the arts because there's so much research around how that enhances academic performance, how play, how physical activity enhances academic performance, that they are leaning into that. And I think we're recovering a lot of that, but a lot of it's still going. And then for me, a bigger problem is when I walk in to have a meeting at a school about teaching and learning, and we get involved in the test scores, they're just soul-killing conversations because you can't win. And I'll show you why it appears that way in a minute. A few weeks ago, I went to a superintendent's meeting for the entire city. I was invited as the UCCS person. I also run the, I'll get to that later. I was invited on behalf of UCCS to go to this meeting. And for a while, it's kind of jovial. People were reconnecting. There were no superintendents, by the way. They all sent proxies. None of them wanted to go to the meeting, but there were CDE people there. And over half the meeting divulged into testing, test reporting. Why do we have to double count this kid? It kills us to have to triple count that kid. To me, those are soul-killing conversations. That's not what we should be talking about. We should be talking about why are they struggling with factoring? What can we do about that? How can we approach it better? Those are good conversations. Most of them are soul-killing, and I think that's a problem. Here's the big one. And here's where we start to fade into what I think is part of the ethical implications. Under at-risk, there's a lot of names, at-risk populations, underserved, underperforming populations in the state of Colorado and nationwide perform abysmally lower on these assessments than anyone else. The at-risk language learners, the impoverished, almost a direct correlation to low performance and poverty. Blacks, Hispanics, Native Americans, also a close correlation. Blacks, Hispanics, and Native American to the impoverished. Many of them live in impoverished area. Don't accuse me of critical race theory, but it kind of feeds in there, I think. High schools don't teach that, by the way, just for your information. They teach truth. But, well, not always truth. Let's not debate that right now. Didn't mean to go there. Here's the state assessment report for the entire state last year. We're looking at third grade, which is actually better than most grades. All these low scores across 3 years. They skipped 20 to 22 because of the pandemic. They don't really report those out. So they don't see it as valuable data. You can track here are Asians, here are whites, every other underserved population. See how much lower, nearly 30% lower. This is the percentage of students who perform at a proficient level on the state assessment. Across the state, we're barely in the 50s for every student. But for the underserved, abysmally lower. And abysmally is a correct word, I believe. I mean, we do question that. The state has always said, close the achievement gap. I remember this as a principal. You got to close that achievement gap. How do you do it? Better teaching. Okay. Just come and show us how to do that. You know, we're doing the best we can. It's got to be something else. But we never question is the test. My granddad, Kitzmiller, was a math teacher. Simple man farmer, lifted the dust bowl, became a math teacher. When he heard I was going to be a math teacher, like most math teachers, very few words. These are the most words I'll say today because I don't like speaking that much. He said to me, Kurt, I figured if half my kids failed the test, that was me, not them. I remembered that. So I made sure that never happened. If it did, I rewrote the test or I changed my teaching. In the state of Colorado, they'll say, well, we need to improve our teaching. You know, we need to diversify our teaching to meet this end. Never once do we say, well, is it the test? Are we not giving the test? Are we not evaluating these students in a way that they can show their intelligence? Obviously, to me, it's obvious. That's not happening. But nobody ever asked the question. No, I don't think anybody ever challenges that, which is kind of to my point. I'm going to start trying to ask those questions and try to get to the people. I don't know how to do that. I'm going to try to figure it out, ask the questions, because I don't even know if the people in power, the state board, commissioner of education, I don't know if they even ask those questions. We seem to just accept what's sent to us and deal with it. We're very obedient in education because we don't have enough money to buy ourselves out of trouble. No offense, business, you got all the money. Okay, maybe a little offense, but you're not laughing. Come on, that's kind of funny. A little bit. So obvious. So to me, there's an ethical implication there that we need to consider for sure. I'll get to this in a second with the solution. So sorry, I'm thinking ahead of myself here because I'm running shorter on time than I had planned. Other ethical issues, I think. No one sees the test before it's administered. Pearson Learning writes the test. CDE website says, in conjunction with Colorado educators, I do know teachers who've been invited to test writing sessions along with Pearson. I've never heard a teacher say, guess what? I saw that question on the test. So I don't know, maybe that does happen. Here's the cynic in me poking out a little bit, but the teachers don't get to see it anyway. I mean, it's heavily locked down. You can't look over students' shoulders. You can't talk about what was on the test. Heaven forbid we learn a little bit more about how they're being tested so that we could do it better. They do publish information. They have released items that you can look at. So and they're real released items. So there are ways you can get a better insight, see the test a little bit better. But the point here is before we give it every year, who's looking at it to make sure it's valid, to make sure we're doing right by kids. And I'm not sure that's even possible. There's so many tests. You need 20 people looking at them, 40 people looking at them. If you've worked in testing at the state level, I'd love to hear if you know anything about that later. 2 weeks of instruction loss, we already covered that. It's not equitable. I think that's pretty obvious. Data is used to grade and compare schools. All data is posted. Every school gets, not specific data, but every school gets a report card by the state of Colorado. It's published. You can go on there today and see any school's report card, the good and the bad. So if you're shopping for a school for your kid and you have the money to drive them there, you're going to choose one of the schools that's high performing, which locks the low performing schools into low performance because the kids can get out. Lots of possible ethical implications there, I believe. The data is also used in teacher evaluation. I think that's unethical. I use data in teacher evaluation, but I use close data. That means assessments that the teachers wrote that are authentic to their instruction, aligned to the curriculum that we use to teach. That's what should be used in teacher evaluation because we do need to see if our kids are growing. And this is useful. The high level data, the far data, it's far away, it's written by someone else that they don't even know what's going to be tested, is useful to evaluate systems, to evaluate programs, but not individuals and not teachers. That's the way I feel about it. Now, here's where it gets really into the weeds for me. Here's where I think questions need to be asked. But I don't know that, and maybe they are, I don't think they are. For-profit vendors, we need them. Teachers don't have the time to write all the curriculum they need, nor do they have the knowledge. I think for-profit vendors hire people that are knowledgeable. That's not the question. I've met curriculum writers. I've met lesson writers. They often hire teachers. Most of the time, they don't have any more experience than the teachers that are working in classrooms. Teachers should rewrite lessons. They should tweak lessons. That's a lot of my work when I go out as helping teachers rewrite their lessons, make them more effective. But we need the for-profit vendor. We need a place to start. So don't get me wrong there. We need them. But here's the reality of it. I'm going to pick on Pearson because they have the biggest hand in the cookie jar. They're the largest textbook publisher in the United States. I read that they were one of the largest publishers in the world, but I couldn't verify that with a second source. So I decided not to include that. But they're big, so it means they make a lot of money because you couldn't do that. They write the Colorado CMAS, they author it. To me, is there a conflict of interest there? Maybe not, but if I'm an administrator and I know Pearson writes the test, then where am I going first when I want to buy curriculum? Going to Pearson. At least going to consider them. They're also a major contributor to the National Council of Teachers of Math. They're probably major contributors to all the national councils across the discipline. I chose math because that's what I know best. NCTM in math sets the tone for math instruction. They are the boss. If they say it, everybody falls in line. Right now, math is using a problem-based approach, which I think is problematic for underserved populations. Imagine if you can't read well, if you don't have a lot of context and knowledge, and every problem put in front of you has a bunch of words that come in paragraph form. That's the major approach promoted by NCTM, so that's what all the curriculum writers are writing to. My question on this, the cynic in me is saying, well, who's really calling the shots here? NCTM and Pearson obviously have a partnership. NCTM needs funding donated to run their program. Who's aligning to who? That's my question. Because really what it comes down to, if Pearson's writing the CMAS test, we're all teaching the CMAS test, and Pearson or NCTM is making all the decisions about what our kids should know. I have a little bit of an issue with that because that's a very small population of people, and at least one of them's in it for the money. They're a profit center. I don't think profit belongs in education anywhere. I think our textbook publishers should be nonprofit organizations too. It just doesn't work that way. So I'll just leave that there. You can think what you think. I'm a cynic. Please remember that. But I think it needs to be questioned. I think someone should be asking what's the reality here? How much control does Pearson have? How much do we yield to NCTM and these other agencies? just to highlight this, I was in a conference last week put on by Marzano Resources. They're a major player in K-12 PD. If you've been in K-12, you've likely heard of them. I think they are good. I like their stuff because they don't say, I'm going to solve your problems. They're going to say, have a system that'll help you solve your problems. I like that approach, so I happen to like them. I was in a session last week. It's a very good workshop, and but they're for profit, so they sell books. The first of every presentation is, hey, you should buy my book that I just finished. So I well, my partner said, we got to sell some books, then we can get to the real stuff. But the stuff's good and the books are good, so I go. And I wanted to use some of this lady's slides that their slides are copyrighted. So there's the for-profit piece. So you can't just use their slides. Like you can use mine, they're not copyrighted. The story I make copyright, depends on how good it is. But one of the book titles of this presentation, I was in Ethical Test Preparation in the Classroom. I thought that, of course, that grabbed me because of what I'm doing right now today. Someone else is thinking about this a little bit. And we need to think about that as we're preparing kids for the test. By the way, it appeared, this workshop, they said, we're not all about that. We don't think it should all be all about the test, but the reality is you're evaluated based on the test. So you have to prepare your kids for the test. That's true. Can't argue with that. The next one's the one that really caught my eye. Test-specific thinking, teaching students to think the way tests make them. So the workshop was about that. How do we teach kids to think the way the tests are requiring them to think? Does that seem problematic to anyone? There are people who think that's fine. If you're one of those, good. I'm going to try to talk you out of it in the next 10 minutes. I don't think that's fine. But that's the reality. That's what teachers have to do. We have to. So then the test really is dictating what we teach kids, what we want them to learn. So let's stop for a second and take a break. One more comment about that. The state of Colorado test for math anyway, 50% of the points come from math reasoning. So it's not about doing the math, it's about how they think about the math. I honestly don't even know how you test that. I can sit down with a kid and figure it out, but I don't know how you ask a question that gets to that. And at least half of Colorado's test score comes from that. The other half is actual math. Performed on a computer, so they also need to know how to use the computer and read the questions if they have a reading issue. So let's stop for a second because I've been talking for a while again. Just what I want you to do is on this note card, write down something that resonated with you because I want to read these. Or write down something you still have questions about. We should have a tiny bit of time for Q&A because I'm really almost done. But in case, put your questions on the note card. All right, keep writing if you need to, but I want to jump to the solution because there are solutions. What I've been looking for this year, schools that do it differently, that don't just focus on the test score, that focus on it. They have to give the test. It's still important. All these schools that I'm highlighting real quickly, but it's just not the end all be all for kids. They're finding other avenues, ways for kids to get engaged. The first one, Vista Ridge High School, I started working with them 10 years ago because after my time at the community college, I envisioned a math pathway for kids that were completely disengaged. Because I taught students at the community college a class called fractions, decimals, and percents. That's taught in fourth and fifth grade. So they had no recall of math pretty much at all. So I envisioned a pathway that would reconnect learners. And I wrote it up in a white paper. I sent it to several principals, just kind of took a shot. One principal called me, he said, let's do this. Let's put in this pathway. We started with one class. 9 years later, it's a viable pathway for kids, and kids are re-engaging. The focus is off of the test score. We do give test prep SAT type questions because we want the kids to do as well as they can. And some of them are good questions, but the focus is on re-engaging them in math and helping them accomplish what they want to accomplish. Some of them want to go to university. You want to go to the university, then you got to be prepared for a college algebra level of math. And we've been pretty successful doing that. But in order to do that, we have to just completely forget standardization because we take them clear back to fractions, decimals, and percents so that we can reconnect learning and re-engage. That's a brave thing for a school to do. That's a really brave thing for a school to do. The district's always questioning it. So I was just in a meeting 2 weeks ago defending it. We constantly have to defend this model. Right now, the principal, Thomas Payne, he wasn't a principal when I started, they call him T-Payne. He's trying to create a culture where the kids have He's emphasizing student leadership. He's messaging this school is yours. If we have a great school, it's because of you. You set the tone. We want seniors to encourage and motivate freshmen to do well academically and in activities. I think that's going to work really well. It's going to take 3 or 4 years to see how that plays out, but I get to go there quite a bit, so I'm excited to see how that works. McClave's a tiny little school district in southeastern Colorado, 10 miles from where I used to work. To me, they look like what I feel like we used to look like. A new superintendent came in, and a lot of the teachers left, and they went to McClave. So they got all the really great teachers I had when I was principal. That's what makes the school good. It's good teachers, by the way. High performing. 3 years they've been received the highest marks from the state of Colorado. So I called them and said, "What are you doing? How much emphasis do you put on the test?" They said, "It's important to us. It's not the end all be all. We find other ways to engage kids. They have a strong FFA program. Always have. They're out in the middle of fields. Literally, they're surrounded by pastures. So that makes sense for them. They have strong athletic programs." I said, "What do you do for kids who don't fit in those boxes?" They said, "One example is we started a gaming team. So they have a video gaming team that participates competitively. Says they you kids shouldn't be playing those." They leaned into it and they said, "We're going to take these kids who love this and we're going to use it." I thought that was brilliant. Favorite part of this was the principal told me, when I see a kid walking around the hallways who doesn't have a person, I grab them and we'll find them a person, an adult in that school who they can connect with, who they can go to, who will advocate for them. Huge. Soulsville Charter School in Memphis, Tennessee. I don't have any permission to even share anything about them, so I'm just going to list their name. Had a student last year who went to their school. They're connected to the Stax Museum, Memphis, highly impoverished area. They take these kids out of poverty. They bring them into this school. They treat them like they're in a wealthy school. It looks to me like they all have to learn an instrument. They all join an orchestra. Makes sense for Memphis, Tennessee, whether they want to or not. And that's the way they engage them. The student I had was a graduate of that school. Very impressive. Her vernacular might lead you to believe, I'm just being honest, okay? Her vernacular might lead you to believe she was less intelligent, but her performance nowhere near that. I mean, high performing student. Really, really impressive. I say that to say that some systems would have counted this kid out. She would have never got to where she was, I think, if she hadn't encountered that school. And the Mountain Sun Community Schools here in Colorado Springs, they go off the charts. You read, they post their standards on their website. They don't align to the Colorado State standards at all. So they're totally, looks to me like they're totally going rogue. I'm trying to get in to visit with them. They haven't responded to me yet. Moving forward, my goal is to visit a lot of these schools. I want to buy a camera, get some video footage, have some interviews, because I want to put out there in the world, here are models of people that are doing it well. And hopefully some of them, like McClave, they still score high. I think that's an outcome. Definitely an outcome of just doing things right. But scoring high is also an outcome of where you live somewhere. Now, I'm almost done. Because on the invitation, it said we'll talk about some strategies for solving this problem. The strategies are sometimes you have to go off the rails and do something different. It's really paying attention to kids and doing what's right for kids. That always comes to the teacher. So the solution, always the solution. The kids are doing well, and there are pockets of great stories out there of high-performing kids that are with specific teachers, but they're teachers who have had the courage to kind of go off tracks, ignore the standards, and just do what's right by kids. And a lot of times the kids end up performing higher. They may never do well on the test, but their performance later in life, they achieve academically, they make great contributions to society. I want those stories. The end of those stories, always initiated by a great teacher. That is the solution, always. The teacher deprograms the negative information. The biggest problem is that negative information kids can see. I kind of skip that slide, but if you're constantly being told every year you're bad at math, we tell kids, well, they all believe they're bad at math, but we're the ones telling them they're bad at math. Half of them in the state of Colorado get told every year that they're bad at math. The teacher is the only one who can deprogram that and say, no, you're good at math. In my class at Vista Ridge High School, because I taught a class in that applied pathway I told you about, my favorite days were kids who were coming in. They might have been doing 7th grade level work, but they're coming to me as juniors saying, Turner, I've never been good at math. I'm good at math. And I didn't tell them, you're not good at math yet, but you're on your way. But that's when we really broke through, that they felt good at math. They still wouldn't have done well on that test, but that's a teacher making a difference. This is just a model. I think I'm going to skip this, but now I should have thought that. Belief support model. This I present to teachers now. I use this with my students. What do kids need from you? They need someone who believes in them, not someone who says, "Hey, I believe you." Someone who, in the action verb sense of the word, believes in them, walks in first day of class, doesn't know who you are, looks at your face, and says, "I believe in you. I know you can learn math." That's what kids need outside of the standardization. And then how do you show them you believe in them and how you find success there? Do you support them? To me, that's finding where they're at and building up from there. What I tell my kids was every year, if you'll come to the table, if you'll bring your efforts, I'll find a way for you to be successful. We'll work together. I'll find material you can do and we'll get you as far as we can. I need you to come to the table. Kids really respond to that. The in-between pieces are C. Teachers need to see their students. The standardization, all the noise out there around testing programs and improvement. Teachers start focusing on that and they forget to pay attention to the student. So I'm trying to remind them, you got to see the student through evaluation. The more you see them, the better you know them, the better you can support them. They have to be seen and known as a person and as an academic because their outside life, their home life, the context of their background all matters as much as how much they've learned in their past years. That's just an added bonus. And then finally, I'm done. The solution is, of course, the teacher. My goal here is I really hope that you leave realizing we need to celebrate teachers. We need to lift them up. Right now in education, it's nerve-wracking. Anytime there's a change in administration, it's a little nerve-wracking in education because how are we going to be seen? Is there going to be funding to do the things we need to do? That's just part. And I'm not being political here. That's the nature of administration change always. So that's out there. They really need to be lifted up right now because politically, the message teachers are getting is pretty bad. They're getting hammered. School district teachers are getting hammered. So please, if you take nothing else from this, had a teacher on the back buying some lunch because they're very poor, so they could use a free lunch every now and again. But the solution is the teacher who says, "I see you, I know you, and you are more than a test."